name is Grace Mota. I work in the international development space. I work in the capacity of executive assistant to the leadership team. I'm really happy to be here at Humanitarian Global, attending the leadership in project management for NGOs and international organization training. This training has been really great because it's given me insight in my role supporting the program teams, but basically just understanding where my role fits in terms of project management. This training has been very instrumental. The facilitators have been amazing with the practical example that we have gained in this program, and I would encourage each and everyone who works in the development space to come and train with the humanitarian organization for this specific training.
Thank you, Sheilah. Allow me to share my screen shortly. So as I said, my name is Brian, part of the technical support team. And I'm here just to give an overview of who we are and what we do. So as the name suggests, we are Humanitarian Global, and we deal in offering training and learning solutions for humanitarians and development practitioners. So if I dive in what we have in this year, we do have various workshops that you might be interested in. Sheilah is going to share the link on the chat section so that you can click on the link, have a view of what is going to be covered in each of them, and probably get to register and see to it that you get to join and gain these skills. So we have common areas such as environmental and social safeguarding. We do have a training workshop in that. We also have writing winning proposals for donor-funded projects. If you're interested in that, there's a link in the chat section. You can click right now or after the session is over. We also have fundraising and resource mobilization for NGOs, grants acquisition and management for NGOs, finance management for NGOs. For those who are interested in that also, we do have it in our upcoming sessions. We do have social and behavior change communication. We do have a session ongoing right now, but there's another one happening in April. Going downwards, we do have data collection for humanitarians, data analytics, just an overview, and then we do have the leadership and project management for NGOs and development organizations, which I assume is what most of you are interested in. So diving deep into that, we do have a class happening soon as this coming Monday, and I'll share the calendar, the exact dates with you. So yes, if you are able to see my calendar, there's a calendar we have for 2025. We'll find a way to share it as we share with you the recording so that you have a look and plan accordingly. So we do have the leadership and project management happening this March, as from the 3rd to the 14th of March, 2025. Which is an online option. We do have both online and on-site options. For those that like to travel to Nairobi, Kenya, we also have that option. And it's happening between the 10th of March to the 14th of March, 2025. Takes 5 days. So if you are interested in that too, you can always click on the link that Sheilah has shared on the chat section just to register yourself so that we can capture your details and contact you after the webinar. So some of the things that you're going to gain in this leadership and project management training workshop are things such as developing advanced project management and leadership skills, gaining a deep understanding of project management principles and practices, acquire leadership competencies to lead teams effectively, learn to plan, execute, and close projects with a strategic approach, and also finally make a significant contribution to the success of projects, among other valuable resourceful skills that you'll get to gain. So as I've mentioned, if you're interested in joining us as from the 3rd or as from the 10th, please click the link right now or after the webinar is over. Then we can capture your details and later on reach out to you. And as I've also mentioned, we do have a wide array of workshops coming through in the year of 2025. We'll be sharing this calendar so that you have a look by yourself and get to choose which option suits you. So thank you very much, Sheilah. And I look forward to this session. Must be interesting. And we look forward to you, Patrick.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Brian. Definitely, it's going to be quite a very interesting session. We will be looking at leadership, planning, and leading projects, the triad of success. And we have on board Patrick, who's ready to take us through the session. Something I need to mention is after the session, we will be having a session for question and answer. So two things. You can be able to type in your questions on the Q&A section so that we can be able to answer them as we move on. But then again, we'll also have a chance to invite anyone who wants to ask their questions directly so that now they can be able to answer. Something else, if you have a comment, clarification, even as you move along in the training, you can always type it in the chat. If you agree with Patrick, if you don't, if you don't agree with Patrick, please just type it in the chat. We will be able to address everything, but please make use of the chat section as well as the Q&A. With that, allow me to bring on board Patrick to take over the session. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you, Sheilah. Hope I'm loud and clear.
Yes, you
Please enable sharing.
Just a minute.
No problem. I had said my name is Patrick Oroko. I'm glad to be your host today for this webinar. I hope to keep it short and, very interesting. I'd encourage everyone to really participate in the chat box. That would really be helpful in terms of just us having a shared understanding, and that would also enable us to progress. Share. So we're going to be talking about leadership, learning, and leading projects, basically around project management. But just to welcome you to this webinar once more. And as I've said, we will interact a lot in the chat box, considering the numbers that I've logged in. I'll mix things up a bit. I won't start with leadership. Allow me to start with with project management. But before we go there, the first concept I want to just, run through is something called the golden circle of learning. Probably some of you have heard about it. And basically in the golden circle of learning, we'll be looking at, there are different spheres within that circle. There's a what, which basically tries to tell you what you need to do in terms of leadership, what you need to do in terms of project management. Unfortunately for the day, we will not be focusing on that circle. It's a good circle, but most of the time it breeds dependency and a very closed-minded angle to the discussion around leadership and project management. The how circle is equally good, and remember this golden circle actually applies in multiple layers. You can have the how and the why at different levels. But the how is also an interesting circle. It basically tries to explain the process of how you achieved your results or how you achieved something. For today's webinar, we'll focus on the big picture, which is largely the why. And once we understand the why, then I think a lot of things would be aligned in terms of just thinking, can I be able to achieve the same equifinality even if I change my approach? Do these different tools, knowledge areas, am I able to, aggregate them into one and learn something around it? So basically, it's okay to ask questions around what and how, but as part of the discussion, I really want us to keep at the why level, just trying to keep it at that level. Just a question for us to interact with in the chat box. Why do most projects fail? Actually, a research done by one of the leading consulting firms says that 71% of projects actually fail. 71 of projects actually fail, and only about 30% have a success rate. Why do you think that's the case? Why do projects fail? The comments in the chat box would really be helpful. Thank you, thank you. I can see Hamid saying no proper planning. Great. Yes, Mary, they're coming. Budgets. Mary saying lack of bad leadership style. I don't know whether I pronounce his name, but lack of willpower and finances. There's planning coming again. Failure to plan and execute from Davis. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So there's a mention of planning and proper planning, failure to plan. lack of willpower. I think this is individual, but nonetheless, thank you for the comments. Now, leadership planning. Okay. It is very interesting that among the things that were listed, most of the people who run projects never anticipated part of the reasons why projects fail. And I agree with all the comments that you've put, but this is a list of the reasons that contributed the most to project failure. And the one that was interestingly, and it is still around planning, especially change management, is poor communication and change management. That it is one of the leading causes of project failure. If you combine both communication, change management, and the budget aspect, and in fact, if you combine that with insufficient resource planning, which is planning basically, it means that almost 70% of project failure are things that we can one way or the other manage. Things around leadership and organizational culture only contributed about 7.5%, risk management about 4%, and external factors. I mean, external factors like the ones we say COVID-19, civil war, those factors actually contributed the least in terms of project failure. But this is interesting for us being in a leadership space to think through that, yes, we are supporting projects to run. What are those reasons that cause projects to fail? And you can keep interacting with us in the chat box so that we can be able to just, ask questions even as we move forward. So in terms of projects, I usually say projects are I usually look at them from largely two lenses. What we have at the topmost is a system of value delivery. This is basically the work that we do. How do we translate those nice theory of changes, the nice logical framework into a proposal? Then we do our stakeholder analysis. Then we go to the community, we mobilize, we do the community entry. All the activities that we do in terms of the execution is a system of value delivery. On the other half, it's what we call the result chain, or what we call the impact chain. Truth is, both the system of value delivery and the result chain are not linear, and they're also interrelated. One of the most common mistakes that we do in terms of project management is to think that results chain only starts when you're executing. The truth is, even at initiation, you're already rethinking through what does the result chain look like? What does the impact chain look like? And that's why I liked most of the comments that you say, why do projects fail? Yes, it is planning. Because sometimes we involve critical staff members and team players and stakeholders way late in the planning cycle. From initiation all the way to closing, it's important for that to happen. Within the project lifecycle management, again, it's also good to note that this is a cyclic loop. I usually say that closing is not the end of the project. Actually, one of the best practices that we need to adapt is to just look at closing as an opportunity for us to initiate another project. What are the lessons that we've learned? What are the best practices that we can take moving forward? How can we consolidate the gains that we have already met? So that basically means that the closeout phase is not necessarily means one project has ended in the literal sense, but the programs continue. The needs in the community are still there, and it's very important to just look at it cyclically. And part of the trainings that my colleague had earlier mentioned around the result chain and the system of value delivery are very critical for project managers in terms of just seeing how to tie the loose ends. Since planning is one of those very important aspects in terms of project management, I've skipped initiation because a lot of initiation, especially in the humanitarian sector, is defined by resource mobilization, fundraising, proposal writing, which is a totally different training altogether. But within our realm of project management and leadership, then we're looking at planning as one of those very important aspects to consider and contribute. So in terms of planning, this is just a list of some of what I would call subsidiary plans that are important. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's for us as people who run projects to just think through, do we have a schedule management plan? Is there a cost management plan? Or once you have submitted the proposal and you're ready to go, you just go out to the field and say, we said we will deliver 5 clinical activities, and that happens. I think it's very important for us to ask ourselves in terms of the subsidiary plans, are they there? And this is part of what makes the bigger project successful. Things like quality, all the aspects, quality assurance, quality control, quality management, are they integrated? If you're thinking about resource management plan, just thinking through, do we have the adequate resources, both human, physical, even social resources? And there are many concepts in the development sector around what we call community resource mapping. Then we also need to think around communication plans. Remember, one of the biggest reasons there was around change and communication management. Who are the stakeholders we need to communicate to? Who are the beneficiaries or program participants? Who are development partners, and how do we communicate with them? And once this is tied up together, I think then it presents an opportunity for us to think through it again. Risk management, I'll not belabor much on that one. We also have procurement in terms of procurement planning, what needs to be bought, what approaches and models are we going to use? Is it just in time? Are we going to do batches? And there are many concepts around there. Then also stakeholders, we also have their levels of engagement. We also have a change management plan, and so forth and so on. We also have monitoring and evaluation plans, which are very critical in terms of just ensuring the success of the project. And remember, I said some of these plans are things we think through from inception. We beef them up during the planning stage, we refine them, and just make sure that they are ready for the project. We also have the human resource management plan, which is also very important for us to consider. And as I said, this is not an exhaustive list of all the plans that we need to have in place. It's important to just, go through each of them and see how they tie back, and feedback in terms of the project. Allow me to just engage gears quickly and take you to leadership. I started with project management just for us to have an overview, and it's something we can still delve deeper. But leadership plays a very important role in terms of ensuring the success of a project. When I was thinking about the leadership functions, there were so many leadership functions that need to be actualized. And that's why I did a word cloud. But if you look at our role as project managers in terms of leadership, it's important to note that the organization determines also the success of the project. The project cannot have their own independent systems, as much as we'd love that to happen, but it is important for the organization to have sufficient systems so that they can facilitate the project to be able to be executed effectively. And a good example of what it would look like in terms of leadership functions, one of the most important functions in terms of leadership is what we call strategic planning. Just looking at the organization mission, vision, and values. How well aligned are they? Because sometimes we lose on critical development patterns because we've not articulated our vision well. We have not articulated the kind of work that we do well, and that basically is important. Part of strategic planning also internally looks at the system. Most of the time we look at strategic planning basically from this is what we are communicating outwards, but there are components of strategic planning that actually look at the system inwards. Can our systems be able to, absorb the resources that we are getting in terms of funding? Can we be able to, do we have the requisite human resource to run the project? And part of the strategic planning includes what we call organizational capacity assessment. And there are many ways of doing organizational capacity assessment. And SWOT is one of the tools. And there are many other tools, but one of my favorite tools is the NUPAS Plus, which looks at capacity assessment from a very broad perspective. Like, what are the legal requirements for a humanitarian organization to comply with? It looks at the different functions, what is required for the communication function, what is required for the finance function, what is required for the mail function, what is required for safeguarding function. And that one basically looks at, are there policies in place that are able to support the project to be operational? And a case in point is, for example, an organization, you don't have a mail function, but you have one M&D officer who is cross-cutting across multiple projects. That means there is no framework that guides their implementation. So it's important to have some of those things. Still, looking at the organization inwardly, it's important to also identify other strategic niches, things like brand positioning. How do people view you outside there as an organization? And this is a leadership role. Stakeholder engagement. Who are your stakeholders and how are you planning to engage them? Both are stakeholders that are important to the organization and stakeholders that contribute to the bigger project scope. It's also important to look at program development as a leader who's in charge of projects. How do we develop our programs? What are the level of details? You know, looking at in our program development approach, do we have strategic goals? Do we have what we call work breakdown structure, such that if you onboard new staff, they're able to pick a project, they have detailed and refined activities that they can be able to run with. And that becomes very important. Another interesting leadership aspect is communication. How do we communicate both at the organizational level and also at the project level? And that becomes very important. Often at times, we usually say that most of the people who conceive projects, who design the nice theory of change, who understand the logical framework, are rarely on the ground. Most of them are either following other strategic goals. Some are attending international workshops, you know, and conferences, which are very strategic activities. But most of the time, you'd find that the program team has a narrowed scope of the project, and that's why it's important as part of the communication that capacity building becomes a very, very, very important part of leadership. Do you build the capacity of your teams to understand the entire project life cycle, to understand the organization, to understand the organizational systems in relation to the project? So why we fashioned our today's webinar and said it's about leadership, project management, and learning, it's basically just looking at what does capacity building hold for us in terms of just making sure that projects are implemented successfully. If you need more info in terms of just looking at the leadership concepts, again, it's something we can share. Then there are also key leadership competence areas that are also important for us as leaders to just get to know. Part of these leadership areas have broken them down into five major leadership areas. I'll start with communication skills. We're not going to go into details in terms of covering, but if you're interested in just having an idea or getting hands-on knowledge, skills, and tools on how to translate some of these leadership competencies into practice, then you can reach out to my colleagues and they'll share part of our calendar in terms of learning. So in terms of communication skills, we have things like listening skills, we have feedback, we have personal branding, which are under leadership, just to mention a few. We also have performance and growth, which are very important things. We have things around productivity. You know, how do you do staff have a personal development plan? What is the performance management structure? Are there what we call key performance indicators, specifically for both the project and the organization? Usually for the organization, we go with key performance indicators. For projects, sometimes we go with project deliverables or outcomes, depending on the space you are in terms of your humanitarian sector. Then we also have decision-making and structure as part of the competencies. I've talked about some of them when I was looking at leadership, but just looking at critical thinking, things around innovation. And in most development projects, you'd find that even when you're doing proposals, one of the key things they're looking at it, what is the innovation that you're bringing on board, which is very important. And then we have people. and team leadership. Again, projects do not implement themselves. How do you build teams in terms of team building, team dynamics, and how do your people engagement strategy become very important? Sometimes we narrow down to team building as just one of the tools we use in terms of people and team leadership, and sometimes combine it with personality studies. But I usually say it's important to understand what information are you getting from those tools that you are deploying in your program. And a case scenario most of the time, and I get it a lot of time, is the personality test. And someone throws a blanket statement that, sanguines cannot be leaders. And I'm like, that's not what the personality test communicates. In fact, personality tests largely are just to enable you to know what are your core strengths. But each of the different people with different personalities can be leaders in their different spaces. So just knowing how to interpret the tools that we have access to, some are open source, some would need refinement and just localization to be able to make them more meaningful. Then there's self-management, things around scheduling, planning, even part of productivity falls under self-management. Just to look at that entire sphere. How do these competencies, how are they translated into practice? And that becomes a very important part in terms of looking at how we run our projects and what is our leadership role. For me, I think the most important part is what is my role as a leader in terms of both ensuring that projects run effectively. There are many things that influence the learning cycle and the learning curve, and I think this for me is the icing on the cake. Are we a learning organization, or people who implement projects? Have we embraced continuous learning? There are several modules, there are several tools, there are several frameworks. Like we have what we call the collaborative learning approach that tries to integrate learning as part of project implementation. But for me, let me give you learning from a different perspective. And the first one is that people learn differently, including our program teams and even us. But it is interesting for us to note that there are people who learn visually by just seeing and being able to implement what they have seen. There are people who learn by listening, and there are also people who learn by experiential, by practically doing it. But when you look at the learning pyramid, which informs the learning process, that lectures actually the retention in terms of knowledge and even skills and even self-ability is very low. It is 5%. Having said this, then it's important for us to know that sometimes even when you're doing your staff orientation and you're giving a lot of lecture, then this is likely to be the case. Reading mostly contributes to about 10% in terms of retention of the knowledge. If you combine both lecture and reading, then you're likely to get a higher percent. Audiovisual, like what we're doing is audiovisual, then this is likely to have a retention of about 20%. And most of the approaches in the upper level of the pyramid are what we call passive approaches to learning. For us, we really encourage active approaches to learning. In fact, it's our model at Humanitarian Global, where we try and make sure that most of the trainings, especially the physical ones, are more experiential than passive. And we have, a 70-30 rule that we can only do 30% of our approaches through passive approaches. So also have demonstrations as part of the learning approaches. We have discussions, basically learning across board, learning across your peers, very important. And in discussions, we can have small group discussions, large group discussions, and even group activities. Interestingly, the percentages shift substantially once people start doing the activities practically. When we talk about leadership, then how do we translate some of those things that we've talked about in theory into practice? If we're talking about organizational capacity assessment, we are discussing a tool in mind. We're already looking at a tool, walking participants through the journey and looking at, so this is how we look at the finance function, practically doing it. Not just saying the finance function needs to have a policy in place. You need tool number 1, you need tool number 2. That's basically a lecture. Then we also encourage a lot of teachbacks. Sometimes when you think about teach others, you're like, oh, I do not have an opportunity at Humanitarian to teach others. But part of your leadership, one of the most important things in your leadership role is to mentor and capacity build your team. And that's part of teaching others. That's part of making sure that the lessons you've learned either through lecture, demonstration, discussion, self-taught online in the age of artificial intelligence, then how am I able to teach my teams and colleagues to be able to walk through the journey? So that we can be able to translate the learning pyramid into practice. I usually say that behaviors, our learning and behaviors are influenced by very many attributes. For example, your behavior is influenced by your level of education. It is influenced by the culture. It is influenced by social media and many other things, including even where you fit in the family. Sometimes we joke and say last ones are more entitled than the other siblings. I don't know whether that's true. If you're a last born, there's nothing personal. But just looking at what influences behavior, if you put all these other things constant, as someone who implements projects and as a leader, how can you translate this learning process into practice? We usually say there are 5 major determinants of behavior. There are 5 major determinants of behavior. We have knowledge, skills, risk perception, self-efficacy, and outcome expectations. I'll start with knowledge. Knowledge is a very important determinant of behavior in terms of mentoring, coaching, and learning. What you do not know, you do not know. If you do not know that there is a tool within the organization or there are processes within the organization that can help you translate the project into reality, then you don't know. But the truth is, knowledge is never enough. Some of us learned that if you want to cross the road, you look right, you look left and right again, but practically is that what we do? Some of us know that when you're attending a meeting, you need to buffer and keep some time, but sometimes we just last minute, almost like microseconds to, I'm not late. So we usually say knowledge is not enough, but it is a very big determinant of behavior. So as a project manager, as a leader, one of the important things you need to know is that knowledge is built through teaching. Knowledge is built through teaching. If there's a new tool, disseminate it within the team. If there's a new strategy, disseminate it. That's how knowledge is built. Then the second skill, the second determinant of behavior or construct is what we call skill. And skill basically are 4 competencies that translate all the others into practice. I usually say skills are innate abilities. Skills cannot be transferred. Skills can the efficacy of the skills can reduce a bit, but it can never disappear. A practical, very rare. There's still some aspects of skills that remain. Skills are largely built through trying out. So if you want to build your project team competencies, there are things you need to allow them to try out. It is a stakeholder engagement meeting, provide leadership, introduce the meeting so that they learn how to do some of those things. And a good example is this even resource mobilization. If you want to be a good proposal writer, you cannot learn by looking at nice proposals. You have to learn by trying out. You have to try and craft that compelling problem objective. Then at least you get over time to get the skills. So skills, trying out. Then the third determinant of behavior is the risk perception. And this is a perceived, benefit that something can, perceived negative consequences of particular behavior in terms of learning. So for us as leaders, how this applies is sometimes we are scared of our project teams failing. I know this might not sound like something you want to hear. Failure is okay. In fact, we need to embrace failure in totality. The earlier you fail, the better. So sometimes it's also okay to allow, in a moderated way, to allow our project teams to fail. If they didn't plan for a power outage during a community outreach, as a leader, it's okay for them to, let the meeting date arrive. There is no backup generator. The meeting cannot continue. It is okay. I know sometimes resources are being spent, but the truth is sometimes failure is the best teacher. I mean, it's a good teacher, though not the best teacher. And that's why I sometimes differ that experience is not the best teacher. It can be too far too, and learn some of the consequences. So it's good for them to learn about the negative consequences. How do you build risk perception as a leader? One is sharing experiences or real life scenarios of events that have happened. If you look at programs and projects that are successful, they learn a lot from the mistakes they have done previously in their previous implementation cycle, and that becomes very important. The other determinant of behavior that as a project manager, you need to, utilize in terms of learning and building the team's capacity is what we call self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is a personal belief that it can be done. And a lot of self-efficacy is built through encouragement. You can celebrate small milestones within the project. Maybe the inception process was successful, congratulating the team and encouraging them as much as possible. There are many ways of building self-efficacy that are also non-monetary, so don't think in a financial angle alone, but it is one of the biggest determinants you can utilize in terms of just helping the team learn and navigate that space. Then outcome expectations, basically for those who are in M&D, when you hear the term outcome, you're already thinking in the right direction. But outcome is the perceived positive benefits of adapting particular practices or behavior. And basically, outcome expectations are built through, they are built through also sharing experiences. So knowledge, just a summary of the determinants and how they relate to learning. Knowledge, you teach as a leader. Skills, you allow the team to try out. That's why we encourage a lot of OJT, on-job training. Risk perception, you share experiences, and that's why we have, best practice forums, learning forums, communities of practice. Self-efficacy, facilitate learning through encourage your staff, encourage them to take online short courses, after the short courses, how do they apply that into practice? And then for outcome expectations, we said again, you build this through sharing experiences. Tying this up to the things that we've learned, basically what we're saying is, it is your primary role. It is your primary role as a project manager, as a leader, to ensure that you are in the front line of modeling learning. You are part of the team that is, ensuring that the capacity of the team is built through teaching others, giving them practical activities and creating opportunities for them to learn, encouraging discussions within that space, so that the projects can be able to achieve, their objective. Just to take you back to why do projects fail? So if there is a learning culture, some of the reasons why projects failed would be addressed. If you look at planning, learning, then things like communication would have been addressed in the process. Things like change management would have been addressed. And realistic schedules. If it's a learning organization, then means that yes, the first project concepts we wrote could be a bit an outlier. But now that you have hands-on practical experience, do your schedules reflect a culture of learning? If it is insufficient resource planning, we agree you can make resources, but if you make serial mistakes, it just means you have adopted the behavior. Can we learn from our previous experiences to improve in terms of resource planning? Can we learn from previous experiences and know that in terms of inception meetings, maybe one is not enough? So if you're looking at core project requirements, then what do I need to integrate and make sure that I have taken into consideration everything? If it is stakeholders buy-in, then I need to work backwards and ask myself, in terms of learning curves, what are the needs of the different stakeholders? If it is government, what do they want to hear? How do they want us to partner? If it is risk management, then from our learning cycle, what are the things about risk that we've picked over time? In fact, some trainings like, for example, conflict mainstreaming is a result of learning across implementing different projects, where you learn that in each project, there is a potential of conflict coming along the way. Then how do we plan for these conflicts from inception? Sometimes we do not have control over external factors, but we can mitigate them. But basically for us, for this webinar is to just look at what is a strategic angle that learning plays in terms of ensuring that our projects are effective and are able to achieve their intended objective. That is the end of my presentation. Ngukanayo is a Greek word for thank you. Oh, it's a Kenyan language. But yes, if you have any questions, I've spared the last 10 minutes for any questions, any comments are welcome.
That has been, I was asking when you were talking about what makes projects fail. That's an answer. How do you define failure? And then there's also a question. Pigeon would want you to elaborate or differentiate more from knowledge and skills, differentiate between knowledge from skills.
Okay, I can take those ones first.
Yes. And as he does that, please, if you have any questions, please again drop them in the Q&A section or raise up your hand and then I'll be able to allow you to speak.
Okay, I will use an example. It's a bit personal. The first time I went to swimming, I looked at how the swimmers were doing it and I would see them kick and pull their hands and I was like, this one I can do. I am a fast learner. And when I went into the water, I kicked and kicked, but I kept sinking. And then what I realized is that whatever I thought I knew by seeing was not the reality of the ground. Basically, knowledge is knowing how to do something, but skills is practical. It's something that you have experience doing. And why I've given the swimming example, for example, as an example is because sometimes what you think you know, but when it comes to practically doing it, you realize that, the work almost looks times 10. And this is because you do not have experience doing it over time. So basically, that's why we say skills are built through trying out. If you want to be good in terms of running projects, then it's important for you to be very intentional in terms of, looking at what are the best practices in terms of doing projects. You become a good project manager while implementing projects. You can have the knowledge, you can learn the tools, we can share with you the tools, you can know this needs to fit here, I need to have a communication plan. That is knowledge. Now, how do you translate that communication plan into practice? That is built through trying out. Knowledge, learn. Skills, you try out. Skills, you try out. So even the tools that you have access to, you need to make sure that you try out. The other question was around, sorry, Sheilah, you can remind me the first question. Someone, I think I've seen the chat box, someone is saying they cannot be able to access the question and answer section. Apologies, Abrow. Can you visual on the project plan, please? Okay, someone has requested that we go back to the project planning. I think this is the slide. You can confirm whether that was a need. You can confirm whether that was a need. For me, I think it's to encourage all project managers that you're doing an amazing job. As part of our learning calendar and part of our learning agenda, there are many resources that you can, benefit from. Some are open source, some you have to go through the training. Please reach out, go to our website, humanitarianglobal.com. You can reach out to Sheilah. She'll be able to share with you some of the tools, that you would require, presentations. Yes.
Okay. Jackson, I think there's a comment that Jackson is making. Projects are implemented within organizations, and there is a direct link on organizational culture and success project implementation. There is need to link the two. You agree?
Yes, that's very important. Let me just quickly look. Part of this slide was just looking at the organization, and that's why if you look at the word cloud, you realize that there are many things around the organization and its strategic, its strategic importance in terms of being a tool to support the projects to be implemented. And culture is one of the things that stands out there. So there's policy, we have cultures, we have partnerships, we have values, we have policy, productivity, visibility, and there are many others. And trust me, both of them are equally important in terms of just making sure that the projects become a success. The reason most development partners are very intentional in terms of looking at the capacity of the organization, basically what they are looking at is, can the organization be able to translate the proposal? You can have a very beautiful proposal, but lack the ability to translate that into practice. And that's where they would be looking at how does your staffing look like? What is the level of expertise? How much grants have been handled? What is the experience? And all those things follow under the leadership functions. That's where we lump them. But I agree there is a very direct correlation between the organizational capacity vis-a-vis the success of the project, and culture is a very critical player in terms of just wrapping up all the leadership functions within an organization.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Patrick, for that. We will be sharing the resources. I think all of us are asking about the presentation. We will be sharing the one to synchronize them, all of them together. So make sure you get that. I believe even on Patrick's last slide, there's a link, there's an email and a phone number. You can always reach out to us on that. And also my colleague has shared a link for you to, if you're interested to attend the upcoming training on leadership and project management, kindly make a point to be able to enroll. And if you also have any questions in terms of how the is structured, when will be doing the trainings, so just raise up your hand and then I'll be able to allow you to speak. One of us had, but then I've seen they have logged off. Good. So I'm seeing Julie. Let me start with Martin. Good. Martin, you can unmute and ask your question. Able to. We can have Julie as we wait for Martin.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, Patrick, for this session. Sorry I came in late, but from what I caught, it was a really great presentation. So thank you so much for that. So I am a project management professional, and my background has been in the NGO sector for actually all my years of work. So I've worked on basically only non-profit projects. So I've always struggled with no cost extension. I don't know what you would say about that, because if I'm looking at it from a project manager's perspective, no cost extensions basically mean you did not use your resources well in terms of the budget, in terms of the timelines that were indicated in the proposal, which then makes you have to ask for additional time and restructuring the budget. So I've always struggled with this in NGOs that I've worked with, because what I've noticed is that some part of management normally want to take advantage of no cost extensions because it adds more time for the projects, which means the staff will be paid for longer. That's how I look at it. But then I feel it also damages the side of making sure that you're efficient in managing projects, which then will show the donor that since I've given you this amount, you've used it well, the deliverables have been great. Here is more for you to continue with that particular phase and maybe add more activities to it. So that's how I look at it as a project manager. But then I now come into organizations where it's more about survival and less about really thinking about the quality and the sustainability of the organization. I don't know if you can speak on that, Patrick, if it's something that you have noticed, but it's something that has bothered me a lot when I work with NGOs, although I love working in the nonprofit sector, but I always come to that level where I'm like, so what are we doing?
Sheilah,
Yes, Patrick, please do. Please do.
Thank you, Julie. I mean, you brought in a very interesting topic altogether. And technically speaking, it's true that most of the time what a no-cost extension means is that you had a project for 3 years, the time has elapsed, but you're asking for more time for whatever reasons. And they come in different forms. And I would share my sentiments with Julie that most of the time what that communicates is that you did not manage your schedule, your cost, and many other things. Though at times, there are no cost extensions that are not necessarily organizational driven. For example, that there are organizations that get what we call an exchange gain, that we had worked with, if you're working with euros, and then there was some form of, rise. Then by the end of the project period, you find that there are resources that have remained, and sometimes even the donor can tell you that what can be done in the next 6 months with the money that we have. But most of the time, as Julie has rightly put it, that it's organizations who try to, retain as many staff as possible, so they would enjoy a no-cost extension, so that they look like, work is still ongoing and people are still on the ground. So to just give a certain perception in terms of the size and the capacity of the organization. So it is true. Ideally, recommended would be, it's important to complete project within set timelines. If there are lessons that you've learned from the projects, and this one, I'm being honest with you, it is okay to even have a project with a 60% achievement rate, provided the 60% achievement rate can be substantiated, because, the design and the implementation are two different things. But sometimes we really want to look perfect. And that's why sometimes organizations would say that we want to do the proper closeout. Proper closeout is actually part of the 3-year planning. So yeah, very important. For organizations that are doing it, we not making excuses for you, but we understand what is the driver for no cost extension. Just to have an image that we had 150 staff at the end of the year, yet a good number were just on extension and volunteering. Thank you, Lisa, for the concept.
Great, thank you so much, Patrick, and I do hope that Julie, you've been assisted and you are open. It now makes sense a bit to you. Let me give one person a chance to ask, and then we can close it, because I'm seeing also time is not on our side. Alalim.
Thank you for your nice presentation. It is really quite informative. My name is Alalim Hamid. I am from Sudan, male officer.
Okay.
Regarding to the following topic about no cost extension, what is the situation that when you raise the request to the donor, and how they look at you? Is it you are going to put your organization in danger? If you get me right. Because a lot of, I know a lot of my experience, a lot of project managers, they keep raising the no cost extension. And I know that it is in long term, it might affect the organization reputation with the donor. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you for the
Patrick?
question. Thank you for the question. Let me give a context so that we do not, blanketly, say no cost extension is not a good concept. For example, there are projects that find a lot of challenges during inception, and it's well documented for one reason or the other. So some of the formative activities that needed to have been implementing delay, and subsequently delaying all other requisite activities or follow-up activities that were to happen. So you see, for such a case where there is substantial reason why some deliverables delayed, and a no cost extension would be helpful, generally justifies. But if the project was on, everything went on smoothly, you were able to recover from your reports, you're showing that we have been able to manage this situation, then a no cost extension basically just becomes technically an opportunity for you to just extend the tenure for staffing and time for paying utilities and other overheads. Basically, what it means is it's important for you as a project manager to make sure that projects start and end within the stipulated time frame, both from stakeholder engagement and even to preparing them for a closeout. But in the event that a project gets substantial challenges, then you can say, we can request for a no-cost extension. Truth is, since it does not have a cost implication for the donors, most of the time, the resources you're spending is what you didn't consume, or you didn't, quote unquote, burn rate by the time you're implementing the project. That's what you usually consume. But the truth is, there's something Sheilah said, that sometimes it can dent your image, because if you agree to do a project and you've met the objectives, and 15% of the resources have remained, and you return 15% of the resources, that shows accountability. Sometimes, it doesn't make sense for someone to say they implemented a project, 100% of the resources were spent. It's unrealistic. Sometimes it's good just to say there is some resources, but we're okay with the project deliverables. Maybe we are going to another phase of this project, would want to do this that way and return the resources. You see, that already creates a certain, is it a perception or a reputation in terms of just accountability, being honest, being prudent in terms of how you spend your financial resources, and even being realistically in terms of the scope and the delivery of the project.
It's great. Thank you so much. And so someone has said that no cost extensions sometimes are embedded in signed contracts with the donors. And there are donor agreements sometimes that don't come with no cost extension. So if the agreement you signed has no cost extension, then it can't be hurtful to the project. Kindly correct me. Yes, if this is true or not. Yes. So just say yes or no, because I'm seeing time is so much gone. Yes.
Yes, it is true. They are embedded in the contract. Sometimes they can give you the option, sometimes they may not.
Okay, good. Thank you so much for that. So again, we will be having another interactive session in the afternoon, because I want to end this one now. So if you're able to, please join so that now we can talk more and discuss. But thank you so much, Mr. Oroko, for that. A lot of us are seeing these great insights, and things have been very helpful. We really appreciate how the training has been, and the position is well understood and very nice. Thank you so much, Patrick, for that great job. As we wind up, Bakari, please, what are the project success specific indicators to be identified at initiation stage? I'll request Patrick to answer that. She will be able to type in your answer, your question, so that now we can be able to save on time. So please don't leave because Patrick will be typing in your answer then. So with that, I think that marks the end of our webinar for today. Please make a point to join us in the next, how many hours are those? 2? The next 2 hours, we'll be also having a very good interactive discussion. My colleague will be sharing the link, yes, on chat. So if you are interested, again, please join in so that now you can learn more on aspects of fundraising and resource mobilization. So thank you, everyone. Wish you all the best, and looking forward to seeing you in our upcoming class on leadership and project management, so that you can get to learn more from Patrick. Thank you and goodbye.
86% of organizations value professionals that upskill to advance their careers. It's never too late. Enroll for a self-paced online course today and get to enjoy a 10% discount. Our courses are monitoring, evaluation, accountability and learning, water, sanitation and hygiene, disaster risk reduction and management, food security and nutrition in emergencies, procurement and supply chain management, human nutrition and dietetics, maternal and infant young child nutrition,